Hello and welcome back to Pennywise Pauper. I'm your host, Jake Stiles, and before we get to the deck this week, I want to talk to you about Pennywise Pauper deck submissions. So far in this series, we've been playing existing decks, but that is going to change. We'll have one more widely known, widely played deck next week, and then after that we're switching to a variety of things. The first thing is decks submitted by you, the viewers. So if you have a sweet deck that you created or that you found somewhere, you can submit it for me to play and write an article on and take into a league. The next is that if you see a cool common that's legal in Pauper, you can challenge me to build around it. Whether that's Horned Kavu or a Rebels deck or anything that you can think of. The next type of deck we'll see is decks that I brew myself, and also decks created from new cards from new sets such as Shadows over Innistrad, which is coming soon. And lastly, if there's a Tier 1 deck or Tier 2 deck that you have wanted to see, that I have not done yet, I probably will get to it eventually, even though we're moving on to mostly viewer submissions and brews. So just because I haven't done Goblins or Stompy or Infect yet, do not worry, I'll probably get to them eventually. So if you have a deck that you want to submit, or a card you want me to build around, you can email it to me at the address below, or you can tweet to me at JakeStylesMTG. If you send it through email or Twitter, I am basically guaranteed to see it and think about it. You can also leave a comment on the YouTube channel, or on one of the articles that I write, but I don't always see everything that people submit there, so you're taking a small chance of me not finding your submissions if you do that. Without further ado, let's get on to the deck for this week. This week's deck is Mono Blue Delver, a deck that has been around for a long time and survived the banning of one of its key cards, Cloud of Fairies, and is still one of the top decks in the format, even without it. The deck plays cheap, evasive creatures to beat down early, and then counter spells to back them up and stay ahead. Let's look at the pieces of this deck. First, let's look at the creatures. We're playing 4 Delver of Secrets. It's the most aggressive creature in the deck. The goal is to make it a 3/2 flyer as early as turn 2 or turn 3, and use it as your primary tool to beat down with. Next we have 4 Fairy Miscreant. It's a 1-mana 1/1 flyer that sometimes draws you a card if you already have another Miscreant. On its own, that's not that good. However, when combined with the next card, it gets great. So we also have 4 Spellstutter Sprite. It's a 1/1 flyer with flash, and it enters the battlefield and counters a spell with CMC X or less, where X is the number of fairies you control. So if you can curve a Fairy Miscreant into a Spellstutter Sprite, you could counter a 2-drop instead of a 1-drop with the Spellstutter Sprite alone. It doesn't really look like much, but it's a great way to keep up pressure while also preventing your opponent from doing anything that matters. We'll skip to Spire Golem real quick. Due to the affinity for islands, this could be a 3-mana 2/4 flyer if you cast it off of islands only, but sometimes you play it for 2 or 1 or even 0 mana as the game gets later, and it's just another good flying threat. Backing up to the 4 Ninja that depowers, the reason this card is played is because all of the other threats fly, which means they're very likely to be not blocked on any given turn. And when you can ninjutsu in the Ninja for just 2 mana very consistently and get to draw a card, then it lets you churn through your deck and keep on putting out threats. Additionally, all your cards are fairly cheap to replay. If you pick up a Spellstutter Sprite, you get to replay it and possibly counter a spell again. If you pick up a Fairy Miscreant and you still have one on the battlefield, you get to draw a card again. If you have 6 islands in play, you can pick up a Spire Golem and cast it again for no mana. Lastly, we play a Bone Splitter. This is obviously not a creature, but it does augment the other creatures in our deck. While Delver of Secrets can be a 1-mana 3/2 flyer, and Spire Golem is pretty big, the Fairy Miscreants and the Spellstutter Sprites are pretty small on the battlefield. Being able to turn any of your creatures, even a 1/1, into a bigger threat helps you speed up your clock. Next we have our card selection and our interaction. We play 4 Ponder and 4 Preordain, which help us find whatever we need at the moment and help us set up the top of our library for Delver of Secrets. 2 Gush, which is a nice play on turn 4 or turn 5 when you don't mind picking up some islands. On the bottom we have 4 Force Spike, 4 Counterspell, and 4 Vapor Snag. The Force Spike should signal to you that the deck is trying to end the game very quickly. You want to keep your opponent on the back foot, and you want to end the game quickly enough that the Force Spikes will always be relevant. The 4 Counterspell are the best way to protect your board state and your creatures. And finally, the 4 Vapor Snag allow you to move blockers out of the way, or potentially rebuy one of your creatures if you want to recast it, such as a Spellstutter Sprite. The mana base is extremely straightforward, consisting of 17 basic islands. You'll note that unlike some other monocolor decks, such as Mono Black, there are no cycling lands, there are no remote isles. The reason for this is that the deck does not have time to play tapped lands. It generally needs all of its mana on turn 1, turn 2, and turn 3. There are various cards that you can sideboard with this deck, but I went with one of the more focused sideboards that I found, with only 4 unique cards in it. The 4 Null are good against Affinity and Tron. The 4 Hydroblast are good against red decks, such as Goblins and Burn. The 4 Cursive Chains are good against decks that can get out creatures that you care about, such as Ulamog's Crusher and Gurmag Angler, ones that you might not be able to race. And the 3 Stormbound Geist are a great option versus control matchups that are just trying to kill all your creatures. Having 3 extra creatures in your deck that have to die twice a piece to go away is a pretty big advantage. So now that you know the basic game plan of the deck, to attack with cheap flyers and protect with counter magic, let's get to the matches and see how we do.